We were
About a
watching
sheriff.
Longmire last night. And in the show, we're upstairs. I don't know, it's 9 o'clock watching TV. And all of a sudden they said this kid was in an accident and they had to put in a feeding tube, and they showed the feeding tube. This was last night. And I turned to him and I said, what is this like for you? You're watching Longmire and they're talking about a feeding tube and showing the feeding tube. Jeff, this is yours. And you said to me, if it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. It's no big deal. And I went, wait. It's just you and me in the bedroom alone. You don't need to be humble like you're in front of a big group of people. What is this like for you? A lot of people do a lot of things. This was just something I did. And I was so blown away at how genuinely humble you are as a person to be watching this. And it was just you and me. So you meant it. With all that you've accomplished, that's how you see yourself. I was just blown away.
I was 32 years old. I finished training when I was 20. I was 32 years old. And I get a call into the new chairman's office. He was the interim chairman, Jay Ankeny. He says, Jeff, I got a real bad problem. He said, this affiliated hospital across the street, Mount Sinai, the Jewish hospital, you worked there when you were a kid. He said, they're affiliated, but they can't hold a chairman. Every 5 years, they get rid of the chairman because there's so many politics. You know the hospital. Listen, you're a good teacher. You're a great surgeon. I want you to go be the chairman over there. If you don't like it, you can come back. I said, I'm only 3 years out. What can I do? He said, please, just go over there. You're a great teacher. You'll be great. So I said no first. And then a friend of her family's, who was president of their board at that, just done being the president, his name was Maury Saltzman, very important in Cleveland, called me to his house. He said to me, the summary was, take this job, it will change your life. This is a wise man. Okay. I said, okay. By the way, I got a letter, an anonymous letter signed by all the surgeons there that unanimously we don't want you to come. Here's this young kid who used to be their scrub nurse 3 years before, going to be their chairman now. And at that hospital, I was able to learn how to be an administrator and an academic surgeon and make mistakes in an acceptable environment. Mount Sinai was a gift in my life. It was a place where I could grow and flourish and develop into an accomplished professional. I think it did that for a whole number of individuals over generations. And it represents the Jewish commitment from generation to generation.
What an honor it is to be able to participate in this wonderful celebration of Jeff's career. And it's great to reminisce about our time at Mount Sinai. It started when Jeff called me in 1980 for running the ICU in a teaching hospital that he was Department of Surgery director, and with a new CT program about to start. I was most fortunate to have accepted the position for the next almost 2 decades. I thought I was working with, not for Jeff. And that was the case with the other practitioners there as well, I think. Whether it was for patient care concerns, house staff or student training, Department of Surgery planning, or hospital administrative efforts, a collegial effort was the way to go. His leadership was also supportive and constructive, and if you presented a good reason for an issue, he was very supportive. A great example of this was his helping me to bring a new technique with acute kidney failure, which I could not get the nephrologist to undertake. After explaining to Jeff my reasons, I was able to get trained in CRRT and subsequently got the ICU staff trained as well. It is now widely used worldwide. Jeff was also important with the teaching program at Mount Sinai. It was a great source of satisfaction for those who were there to teach as well. I was really honored that he arranged for the CWRU Surgery House staff to get their ICU training with me. And finally, Jeff had a simple and personal way to impact the department and house staff by having Journal Club at his home. It was pleasant, comfortable, productive, and fun. And it was also an opportunity to see some of his family, including Jackie and the kids, very frequently. I really appreciate the opportunity to say hello during this great time of celebration. See you soon.
This guy's like my brother. He's my partner for many years, Ami Azodi. Nobody knows him here. And the reason I'm showing him is because he represents hundreds of you. For every one of us that's able to get up on this podium and discuss what we discuss, there's somebody at home, somebody who's watching our complications, somebody who's taking care of the administrative tasks, somebody who's doing the scut work so that we can be the heroes that you clap for. Ami had worked with me in research. He helped develop the original techniques of PEG and PEG, and he still is my greatest friend today.
Oh, boy.
My guy was Ami Azodi, an Israeli guy who was a fully trained surgeon when he came to me, did his training all over again, and then I did my fellowship and joined me, and had a very positive attitude, and he could do it all, and we were blood brothers until he passed away. So I went to Weatherhead School. I had unbelievable mentors there, Scott Cowan, Mohan Reddy, and others. And I worked with people in my group like Chuck Fowler, Joe Hahn, Rob Kay. We had so much fun. The doctors were the dumbest of the dumb in the class. We had no knowledge of business, and it was fun. And the best thing I learned was from Scott Cowan the first day when he said, if you think you're going to be a good businessman just because you graduate from this, you're wrong. You'll be able to go into a business meeting and say bullshit at the right time. And that helped.
I'm honored actually to say a few words on the occasion of your retirement because you were a student of mine and a friend of mine. I remember first meeting you when you were a student of mine in the EMBA program at the Weatherhead School of Management. You didn't at that time know a lot about business, but you were certainly interested in the topic. By the time the course ended, and as I recall, you did very well, what I learned about you were several things. One, you were a mensch. Number two, you were a real character. You had a wonderful sense of humor in class and outside of class. And I also found out that you were a very good friend. Because even though you were a student and you were my doctor, I think you most as a friend. What you did for me during some difficult times, health times over the years, but also what you've done for so many other people through decades. You were also, by the way, someone who I think has done so many things for others beyond just being a doctor. It is being a friend. It is being a philanthropist. It is making Cleveland a stronger place in every hospital that you ever worked at. So in my book you're one of the really good guys, and I'm honored to be a member of your club.
SAGES began in 1981 or so by a group of surgical endoscopists like myself. There were just a few of us. Gerald Marks, Tom Dent, Ken Ford, and others. And they were upset that they couldn't get their surgically oriented papers on the program at the Medical Endoscopy Society meeting, and they started SAGES. And I wasn't sure about SAGES at that time because I was already in many committees of the Medical Endoscopy Society because of PEG had increased my visibility. But I participated and I was on the governing board, and I soon became president of SAGES. Around this time in the late 80s, something unbelievable happened. It was first noted in France. Someone took a laparoscope, which was a telescope, which had been used in GYN for years, and I had used. I had actually written papers about it where you put your eye to it, and I had used it for this and that. I became friends with a guy named George Bursey who was doing it all under local for diagnostic purposes. Well, Sally was hired by Barbara Bursey. Sally was always there, but not just to run it. Sally was an advisor, someone who was always there to tell us the right thing to do, to listen to our frustration, and to help us do the best job we could possibly do.
I first met Jeff and Jackie Ponsky in 1993 when I began with SAGES. Needless to say, Jeff was one of the very early presidents of SAGES. His contributions are more than I can possibly elaborate. He is relevant to this day, and he always has been. A few memories along the years that I have of Jeff. Starting from those earliest days, there was a retreat in the woods of Cincinnati, and Jeff at one point stood on a chair. He was so passionate about the topic that he was discussing, and he stood on a chair and he was impassioned in the message that he delivered. And every time I've encountered him, he brings that passion to whatever he does. Jeff, my advice for you in retirement, not that I know anything about that subject, I'm going to quote a lecture that we both probably just heard at this meeting from John Mellinger, who was one of your trainees, I believe, and certainly won an award in your name, was, let's call it recalibrating. So here's to this next phase of your life, recalibrating. I know you will bring your personality, your passion, your love, your family, and your welcoming and inclusive nature to this next phase. And I cherish the fact that I can call you colleague and friend.
This man is a very personal hero of mine and a prophet, George Bursey. I don't know what you were doing in 1962, but George wrote when he was in Australia, this is just how he speaks too, "It is to me astonishing that this method has not acquired more general interest regarding the technique of peritoneoscopy," in 1962. Well, George Bursey and Worth Boyce and others have been trying to tell the whole world about doing this technique for years. Seems that the surgeons finally figured it out in 1990. He was a prophet.
I met my friend Jeff Ponsky approximately 50 years ago when he called as a young surgeon from Cleveland to be interested in laparoscopy performed in local anesthesia in patients with abdominal problems to create a diagnosis, take biopsies, and other minor procedures. And this is where we met first and created a very close relationship. I had a wonderful time during the years with my friend Jeff, who helped significantly in the evolution, involvement, as well as improvement of the procedure, not speaking later of the flexible one in the GI system, where his lectures, his production was really a great leader. I was asked once by SAGES, they wanted to give me some medals, and during this, it was approximately 20 years ago, a huge cake was wheeled in. I was very impressed and was more surprised when Jeff Ponsky stamped stepped out of this cake and greeted me. Therefore, as you can see, we had a very close relationship. And Jeff, I'm again, even in my mature age, thank you very much for your continuous advice, help, and your wife Jackie, who in our very difficult year spoke to us on a weekly basis. Jeff, you were very important in my life. Thank you very much.
Jeff, it's so wonderful to be with you on this very, very special evening for this Fedschrift. You know, we go back a long way, and I think really it's two things that brought us together. It's our love of sages and our love of flexible endoscopy. And of course, sages really brought us together. We both were there at the beginning. We both seen this organization grow. We both had an immense amount of fun. I remember some events that do stand out. And remember, I followed you as president of SAGES. And I remember the night, of course, when we were on stage and you rode in on this beautiful horse and you lassoed me and tied me to a tree. And I thought you were going to do something bad to my body, but I wasn't sure. But I'm glad I survived. And again, through many, many years, we've been traveling together, Donna and I and you, Jackie, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Of course, I didn't train with you, but we've had fun together. But the other thing that brought us together was our love of flexible endoscopy, our love of teaching, and you are the master teacher. And you know, one of the great things in my life was to be given the Ponsky Endoscopic Teaching Award. But I remember you're inviting me to participate in those wonderful courses that you did in Cincinnati. We did that for a number of years. And then finally, in the late 80s, we joined together and we collaborated on really the first textbook on surgical endoscopy. That was a real joy and something that I'll always treasure. So on this special night, I can only say that I love you like your family loves you, and I wish you the best in your next career. So have a wonderful evening.
But in 1989, the people in France did this under general anesthesia and put a video camera on the end of the laparoscope and took out a gallbladder. And they showed this at the SAGES meeting in 1989 in Louisville, Kentucky. Who was president-elect of the SAGES then? Me. So I took over the presidency of SAGES at the time laparoscopy developed. I was very fortunate. Well, our society went from 300 members when I took it over to 2,000 members in a year and a half. And it was based on the growth of laparoscopy. Ironically, it was so hard to get trained in laparoscopy, but because I was president of SAGES, I had friends like Nat Soper, George Bursey, John Hunter, who helped me get trained and get instruments. And I did those procedures at Mount Sinai. Now, ironically, again, I had John Mellinger as my fellow. Picture John and I are doing our first lap chole on a board member from Mount Sinai. And who's teaching me? One of my former fellows, David Doppler, who at that time was up in the Portland Medical Center in Portland, Maine. And he comes down to teach me. He had done 8, and he came to teach me my first 2 lap choles. We sweated a lot, but we got it done. But what goes around comes around, and we got them done, and that led to a lot more in the future, a lot more things.
Jeff, there are people who go through life wondering if they made a difference. You do not have that problem. You have helped so many people throughout your career. All of the patients you've cared for, all of the residents and fellows you've trained, the committees and boards on which you've served, the societies you've led, and all the places you have lectured and visited. You have touched countless individuals and helped shape a generation of surgeons. More importantly, you've made a difference for your family. When I think of you sitting at the kitchen table doing your MBA homework along with your children doing their school homework. I think of you and Jackie with your children and grandchildren. You have shown all of us there is a great and important life outside of medicine. And finally, I'd like to thank you for taking a chance on a Wisconsin farm kid in 1983 as your first fellow. That decision had a great impact on my life for the better. I was able to provide services for my patients that had not been readily available previously. You encouraged me to join ASGE and SAGES, and this led to a lifetime of innovation and scholarly pursuit. In my career, I was able to perform over 40,000 flexible endoscopic procedures. Now multiply that by the number of fellows you've trained, add in the number of patients who've had PEGs performed, and the thousands of surgeons who have heard you speak, and we begin to understand the massive impact you've had on surgical care throughout the world. Thanks, Jeff, for making a difference for all of us. You should be very proud of the career you've had and all you have done. Tia and I wish you a happy retirement. You have earned it.
First time I met Lee Swanstrom, I said to my friends in SAGES, I said, who the hell is this guy? I'm not sure I want to sit next to him. He's got hair down to his shoulders and earrings. I said, what? And this is 1980 something. I said, who is this guy? And then I started to listen to him. Lee Swanstrom is one of the most innovative, bright, talented people I've ever met. Not only, and I use him as an example in a lecture that I give about academic surgery, because he worked at a private place, Legacy, in Oregon, but he also was the guy who wrote the initial papers on evaluation of his results with all these new procedures. And I don't think I've tried anything ahead of him. He's always been right out in front in laparoscopy, and he does endoscopy beautifully, and he does it innovatively, and he's a superb teacher, and we're dear, dear friends. So I think the world of Lee Swanstrom.
Hey, Jeff. Hello, everybody. So sorry I can't be there myself. Duty calls. I'm in the lovely state of Florida at the American Foregut Society, but certainly glad to participate virtually and wish you my best and give my thanks for everything you've done for me personally, everything you've done for our profession. It's been wonderful knowing you and Jackie, and many of the times we've spent together will always live in my memory, and I'm looking forward to many more times together. Anytime you make it to the south of France, you know where to find me, and I look forward to getting together in the future. Anyway, Jeff, congratulations, and have a wonderful event, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Love you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lee Swanstrom. I'd really like to thank you for inviting me to contribute to this wonderful celebration of Jeff Ponsky's contributions to surgery, to all of us personally. And also would like to thank you for asking me to comment specifically on this topic, the laparoscopic surgery era, because Jeff played such a big role and such an important role in the arrival of laparoscopic surgery. So let's start from the beginning. And when laparoscopy arrived, almost out of nowhere, thank goodness Jeff Ponsky was there to help guide it into its heyday. Laparoscopic surgery was truly a disruptive innovation in the realm of surgery. It's often listed as being one of the greatest medical advances in the 20th century, along with transplantation, bypass, etc. Just to summarize the importance of laparoscopic surgery to all of us, less pain, minimizing scars, quicker recovery, blood loss, infection, etc. All things that I think we all appreciate today and really wouldn't live without. A brief history of laparoscopic surgery is relevant to this story. Starting in Germany in 1985, Erich Muhe, a very innovative surgeon, conceived of it, did the first clinical cases, moving into France, where it was rather popularized and introduced to the world. This is Jacques Perissat, who came to America in 1989 at the SAGES, Society of American Gastrointestinal and Endoscopic Surgery meeting in Louisville, where he presented a very brief video clip of first lap chole there, much to the amazement and excitement of the few surgeons that were at this relatively unknown society meeting at the time. Over the next year, this exploded, and throughout the world, but especially in the United States, rapidly replacing open cholecystectomy, and to the benefit of patients and to the kind of amazement of the surgical community. This tsunami, which happened in the early 90s, was phenomenal and really probably has not been replicated since then. Luckily, in 1990, also something was going on at the SAGES meeting. Really, a new president was established, and that was Jeff Ponsky, who arrived right in the middle of this tsunami, if you will, and was there to kind of help introduce it to the public and introduce it to the surgical community. The right man at the right time. The year of Jeff's presidency at SAGES was phenomenal. The society membership tripled, meeting attendance doubled or more than doubled, published the very first in the world statements on credentialing, statements on how to teach lap chole, put on the first postgraduate courses under his guidance, and I think most phenomenally assumed the burden of training the world's surgeons in how to do this new technique. In that 1 year, SAGES put on and improved 22 Train the Trainers courses, which many of us, including Jeff, were very involved in. Aside from his critical role in national and international introduction of laparoscopy, Jeff also took on a very active role in the Cleveland community. As a leader there, he was responsible for introducing lap chole and then subsequent laparoscopic procedures to the community. This maybe sounds like nothing, but it was not an easy task, as many of us realized. Introduction of these new things is sometimes met with some resistance by the old guard, and Jeff, because of his love of education, his kindness and willingness to share, really made that process smooth in the Cleveland area, and Cleveland rapidly became a leader in education in laparoscopic and other new procedures. The introduction of laparoscopic cholecystectomy worldwide was not without its problems. The rapid introduction and the need to train every surgeon essentially in this new technique led to problems, and patients often paid the price for this. This period of time during Jeff's presidency of SAGES was we often refer to as kind of the triangle of shame because of really our mistakes in introducing it. I think Jeff took this extremely seriously and rather dedicated his presidency at SAGES to try to ameliorate that. During his presidency, he made numerous remarkable contributions, establishing some of the earliest guidelines for training of surgeons, earliest hospital credentialing, fighting with insurance companies for reimbursement for this new procedure, and really, as he states here, led the entire nation and the world in this revolutionary procedure with the patient's well-being in mind. It was a serious time, and the society, here you can see some of the founding members really worked hard to try to make this a smooth transition. SAGES was going through great birth pains, if you will, at that time, growing so fantastically, but also it was a time of immense enthusiasm and an amazing growth and vibrancy throughout the society. Certainly, Jeff's presidency and kind of the growth of SAGES was an inspiration to a newer generation of surgeons, many of whom are there in the room with you and where I wish I was. And we were really awestruck by these leaders, including Jeff, and wanted to be like them, and eventually grew up to be leaders in SAGES as well. So we appreciate his inspiration. He also rather established a spirit at SAGES of a family type of atmosphere, having good times together, doing hard work together. And I really trace that back to his leadership. He really believed in that, in getting together and having not just serious time and educational time, but good time together and making friends, and that lives on today. And in fact, today, 30 years later, SAGES is really an extended family, and Jeff and Jackie are really kind of the godparents of that collegial and even deeper than collegial atmosphere that we have today. It was for many of these reasons that I was very honored when I was president of SAGES to give Jeff one of the highest honors SAGES has, a Pioneer in Endoscopy Award, considering him a mentor and once again an inspiration. Was really my honor to be able to give that little bit back to him. I'm going to go a little bit outside of my mandate and also mention Jeff's role in the ASGE, the Gastroenterology Society. He's the only surgeon to ever serve as both SAGES president and ASGE president, and I think that's an important contribution that he made. It's all endoscopy, and laparoscopy is kind of moved into the realm of flexible endoscopy as well, and Jeff really kind of established a liaison with the medical community and showed that surgeons and gastroenterologists can work closely together. Really a hallmark result of that was the NOSCAR experiment. This was a highly minimally invasive surgical procedure, and Jeff was kind of our spiritual leader in that, and it brought together kind of for the first time the gastroenterologist doing high-level flexible endoscopy and the surgeons with expertise in laparoscopy. And this was probably most important and notable for uniting those two silos, typically siloed branches of surgical intervention and carrying it on. So thank you for that, Jeff. So along those lines, I have to throw up this more recent slide. This is during a conference in Strasbourg that Jeff was moderating. This is Jürgen Hochberger, who's my chairman of gastroenterology at the time, and Jürgen had made the mistake of criticizing surgeons doing endoscopy, and you can see Jeff shaking a finger sternly at Jürgen and saying, back off, surgeons have every right in the world to do endoscopy. So thank you for that spirited defense, Jeff. So just to conclude, Jeff represents the best of surgeons. He's got the eye of a hawk, the heart of a lion, and the hands of a lady. A wonderful person, a great inspiration to me, always has been all of my career. So finally, I have to say thanks so much for being such a role model, both to Jeff and to Jackie. Such good friends, such wonderful people. I just can't say enough about it. Truly, you've been role models for myself and Barbara, my wife. And finally, thank you so much, Jeff. Congratulations, and God bless.
I will say that people say, well, you're so innovative to think of these things. And I say that in the beginning of anything that's new, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. And that's cool, because if you're in a new area, it doesn't have to be rocket science. You can look for the things that are obvious and do them and publish them. And so that was an example of something that was just obvious that needed to be done. I was just the first to do it, but it was obvious.
I'm Terry Burke. and I've known Jeff for a few years. Picture this. It's 1960, and this really cute new boy comes to our school. His name is Jeff Ponsky. His clothes don't match, and he can't dance. So I suggested he never wear that green shirt again, and I taught him to dance. Now it's 1963. Jeff and I are in our senior year in high school, in 8th period, when we hear that President Kennedy was shot. Fast forward to the years 1988 to 2010. From Mount Sinai Medical Center to Cleveland Clinic Foundation to university hospitals. Jeff, following you was always an adventure. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. 1960 to 2022, it's a lifetime. JP, boss, friend, brother from another mother, I am so blessed to have you in my life.
Terry Burke met me in 7th grade and said to me, "Don't ever wear that shirt again. It's a terrible green color." And she's been advising me since. Terry was always a good friend and always a wonderful advisor. And as we grew up, we were always sort of in touch, and she was a great friend of Lewis as well. But then she was working in the doctor's office at Huron Road Hospital. When that hospital closed, I said to her, "Why don't you come work for me at Mount Sinai?" She said, "What am I going to do?" I said, "I want to start a trauma program. And I want you to be the person who runs it." She said, "I don't know anything about it." He said, "Neither do I. I just know how to operate on them." So Terry came, she learned all the rules. She made friends with all the people in Chicago at the National Trauma Group in the American College of Surgeons. And we were the first hospital in Cleveland to get a level 1 trauma appointment, even before Metro officially. And she would run everything for me. And she did a great job, and everybody loved her. And then I went to the clinic. "Come on, Terry, we're going to the clinic." And so she ran minimally invasive surgery. I was the first executive director of MIS at the clinic, but Terry did all the work. We had grants to set up, and we had programs and courses. Terry ran everything. Then I went to the UH, and Terry was running courses for me there and doing stuff for me there. And we had a meeting, and Terry was getting a little tired of working. She's now having grandchildren. And we had a meeting around the table once a week where I would tell people, "I want you to try to do this week, and we want you to try to do this week. And Terry, I'd like you to make these phone calls." And she said to me in front of everybody, "I'm not doing that shit. I'm done." And that was it. Terry retired and took over care of her grandchildren.
I will have to say one thing that Stephanie knows. He never intimidated me. I was never afraid of him.
Stephanie, she was my wife away from home. The two of them would plot against me. She was my secretary for 32 years, although she probably debated exactly the amount of time. It was at least 32 years, although when I started at Mount Sinai, she was just a young girl, pregnant, working as an assistant in the office. She was my right hand, my great advisor, and she would often shoo me away when she was talking to somebody because she knew I would be impatient with them, and she would take all the time and care with everyone, be they a patient or an administrator.
And we would call each other.
Yeah. What kind of mood's he in today?
Stephanie would call and say, "Jackie, be prepared. He did not have a good day. He's going to be really grumpy." Or I would do the same to her. "Get ready, Steph."
Shortly after I started working with him, I got a call from his daughter's elementary school nurse. And she said that Kimberly was not feeling well and she wanted to talk to her dad. Well, I said, "Oh my goodness, Dr. Ponsky's in the operating room and he cannot be disturbed." And I said I would have him call when he got out of the OR. So when he came up to the office, I told him this, and he said, this is the first time he ever got angry with me. He said, "Whenever my children call, you find me no matter where I am." And at that point, I said, this is a true family man, and what a great family it is, too. So we worked together for the next 30 years and went to 3 different hospitals. And I stuck to him like glue, but I think he was trying to shake me off, but it didn't work. Anyway, there's just too many words to describe this amazing leader, teacher, healer, and friend to many. Let's just say that he is a true gift to all of those who know him. And he's always been like a shorter big brother to me. Now, I'm humbled and honored to have had the opportunity to work for Jeffrey Ponsky for over 30 years. And those were the absolute best years of my life. I love you and your beautiful family from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.